Greed. Greed is not just the desire for wealth. It is the psychological inability to ever reach a finish line. The most terrifying example of this wasn't a banker, but a general named Marcus Crassus. He was the wealthiest man in Roman history, but he treated the Republic like a liquidation sale. He created a private army of enslaved architects and builders to exploit the constant fires in Rome. When a house caught fire, Crassus would arrive with his men and refuse to put it out until the owner sold him the burning building for pennies. If they refused, he would simply watch it turn to ash. He owned half of Rome just by leveraging other people's desperation. But the nature of greed is that it eventually demands what it cannot buy. Crassus was jealous of the military glory of his rivals, so he used his fortune to fund an unprovoked invasion of the Parthian Empire in the east. It was a disaster born of arrogance. He marched his army into the desert without a plan and was slaughtered. When he was captured, the enemy general knew exactly who he was. They decided to punish his specific sin. They melted down gold coins and poured the molten metal down his throat while he was still alive. They mocked him by saying, "You hungered for gold your whole life, so now you can drink it." His story proves that greed is a void. You can throw the whole world into it, and it will still demand more until it finally consumes you. Envy. Envy is the only deadly sin that provides no physical pleasure at all. It is purely an intellectual torture born from comparison. The definitive story of envy is that of Antonio Salieri, the court composer for the Austrian emperor. Salieri was a man who had made a pious bargain with God. He promised to live a life of virtue and chastity if God granted him the gift of musical genius. He was successful, respected, and wealthy, but then he met Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Salieri watched in horror as this vulgar, immature man-child produced music that wasn't just good, it was divine. Salieri looked at his own work and realized it was merely competent. The torture wasn't that Salieri was a bad musician. The tragedy was that he was skilled enough to recognize true genius, but not gifted enough to create it. He felt betrayed. He watched Mozart write masterpieces without making a single correction, while Salieri labored for days over simple melodies. This envy rotted him from the inside. It didn't matter that Salieri was the most powerful musician in the empire. He felt like a total failure because he wasn't him. In his final years, Salieri claimed he had poisoned Mozart. It proves that envy doesn't want to possess the object of desire. It wants to destroy it so the comparison stops hurting. Wrath. Wrath is distinct from simple anger. Anger is a reaction, but wrath is a state of being where cruelty becomes a language. Vlad the Impaler embodied this completely. He ruled a small kingdom squeezed between two superpowers, and he knew he couldn't win a fair fight, so he decided to weaponize terror. When the Ottoman Sultan demanded tribute, Vlad didn't just refuse. He nailed the turbans of the messengers to their skulls. This triggered a massive invasion. The Sultan marched on Vlad's capital with an army 3 times the size of Vlad's force. But when the Ottoman army arrived, the gates of the city were wide open. Outside the walls, extending for miles, was the forest of the impaled. Vlad had taken 20,000 prisoners and impaled them on wooden stakes, arranged in geometric patterns. The sight of the rotting bodies broke the mind of the Sultan. He was a man who had conquered empires, but he looked at the forest and said he could not fight a man who did such things. The army turned around and went home. Vlad proves that wrath is the total suspension of humanity. It is the willingness to become a monster just to send a message. Pride. Pride is the severance of the connection between a human and reality. It is the delusion that the universe itself should obey you. Xerxes the Great, the king of Persia, possessed a pride that crossed into madness. When he launched his invasion of Greece, his engineers built massive bridges across the Hellespont Strait to move his army. But just as they finished, a storm rose up and destroyed the work. A rational leader would have blamed the engineering. Xerxes blamed the water. He flew into a rage against the ocean itself. He ordered his soldiers to march down to the beach and whip the sea 300 times with chains. He shouted curses at the waves and had his branders burn the surface of the water with hot irons to mark it as his slave. He even beheaded the engineers, as if their death could fix the weather. This detachment from reality was his undoing. He treated nature like a subject that could be bullied. This arrogance blinded him to the actual traps laid by the Greeks, leading directly to the destruction of his navy. Pride makes you believe you are a god, right up until the moment reality crushes you. Gluttony. Gluttony is usually seen as a moral failing of overindulgence, but the story of Tarare turns it into a biological horror. Tarare was a French showman in the 1700s, born with an unfillable void. He could eat a quarter of a cow in a single day and still be hungry. His jaw could dislocate to open incredibly wide, and his body was constantly hot and reeking of rot. He didn't just eat food. He ate corks, stones, live animals, and garbage. The military tried to use him as a spy, hoping he could swallow secret documents and pass them later, but his hunger made him a liability. He was caught behind enemy lines, not because he was bad at espionage, but because he was frantically searching for food in the gutters. Back in the hospital, he was found drinking the blood of other patients to satisfy the craving. He was eventually kicked out after being suspected of eating a toddler. When he finally died, doctors found his stomach was so massive it filled his entire chest cavity, pushing his lungs and liver aside. His story shows that gluttony isn't about enjoying food. It is a broken sensor that leaves you eternally starving, no matter how much you consume. Lust. Lust is the dangerous belief that a single desire is worth burning down your entire life. King Henry VIII is the ultimate warning. He was a wealthy king with a stable country and a loyal wife, but he became obsessed with a woman named Anne Boleyn. He didn't just want an affair, he wanted her as his queen, and he wanted a son. The church forbade his divorce, so Henry decided to break the world. He severed England's connection to the Pope and declared himself the head of the church. He executed his closest friends and plunged his nation into religious chaos that lasted for generations. He rewrote the laws of God and man just to satisfy one specific desire. And the result? Once he finally had Anne Boleyn, the lust evaporated. Within 3 years, the woman he had destroyed the world to get was annoying him. He accused her of treason and had her beheaded. He destroyed his kingdom for a feeling that didn't even last a decade. Lust blinds you to the cost of your actions until the bill finally comes due. Sloth. Sloth is not merely laziness. It is the refusal to face the pain of reality. Emperor Honorius ruled the Western Roman Empire during its final collapse. While barbarian armies were burning cities and slaughtering his citizens, Honorius retreated to a palace in the swamps of Ravenna. He didn't organize a defense or try to save his people. He hid. He became obsessed with his poultry farm, specifically a large rooster he had named Roma. In 410 AD, a messenger arrived at the palace covered in dust and blood to deliver the news that Rome had fallen. The emperor collapsed in grief and shouted that she was eating out of his hand just a moment ago. The confused messenger had to explain that the chicken was fine. It was the city, the capital of the world, that had been destroyed. Upon hearing this, Honorius was visibly relieved. He was perfectly content to watch civilization burn to ash as long as he didn't have to deal with it personally. Sloth is the choice to be comfortable while the world ends around you.